and it's interesting. I don't know, based on the kind of people that we are, I don't know how long we would have kept going if people weren't coming. If people hadn't started coming when we started taking it seriously. I wouldn't say that we're like lazy, but none of us, I think, had the kind of. I see a lot. I feel like I meet kids at shows who are asking me like career advice and all this stuff. And I was not that kid, so I kind of don't know how to answer them. I think we were very much coming to it from a place of like, we're three people. We enjoy writing songs. We like playing music, and we like playing music for our friends.
Yeah.
And then we just got lucky,
I feel like you give that answer to like a 16 or 15-year-old today. They're like, all right, this guy's an asshole. He don't want to share his secrets.
Right. Well, I mean, also, like, I wouldn't, I mean, good Lord, ask me to start a project now. I don't know.
I want to ask you to really begin this is like, how did you all kind of get together? Because listen, in Canada and with any band, sometimes it starts in high school. They know each other. Sometimes it's in university. We have a Canadian band here called the Arkells, which is really cool to find out like their whole background and the name. And sometimes I'm really interested in names because it's like, what was the band's original name before you got a letter that says, hey, fuck off, don't use that name. But tell me like your whole experience of, number one, creating the band and the name, because I think there's an interesting part that the name that you have now wasn't originally the name it was.
That is true. So we, the three of us met in college, which was now a very, very long time ago. We've been a band for 18 years. So yeah, we met in the fall of 2004. We were all sophomores in college. I had put up a flyer in the music department. And really, to really date myself, it was a flyer that had my landline number. So they called my landline. I didn't have a cell phone. We met up and jammed. And they already kind of had a project going called the Sunday Mail. And so I joined the Sunday Mail because their guitarist of 6 months or whatever had left the school. So I joined up with them, and then eventually we kind of, like later on in college, we felt like we were more of a real band. It took a couple of years and probably a couple albums worth of bad material to get through. And then we were like, I think we're ready to record an album. And when we started thinking about doing that, we started thinking about changing our name from the Sunday Mail, which was at the time totally ungoogleable. And it was very clear that was going to become an important thing.
Yeah.
So we came up with a band named Jukebox the Ghost, and it was really like just the most deliberate, like, we got to think of a band name kind of thing. So we were all trying to look for inspiration wherever we could find it. I thought jukebox would be a really fun word to have in a band name. I was like, jukebox.
Yeah.
Great word, Ben really wanted it's something to do with a ghost from a literary passage. And and Jesse, our drummer, wanted us to be the band, like, like the Strokes or the Kinks or whatever.
Like the Smiths, the 1975. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah. So then we just became Jukebox the Ghost.
Well, I'm glad it worked out that way, because imagine if it was like the Jukebox Ghost. It'd be like, I don't get it, or Ghost the Jukebox. You'd be like, what?
Honestly, those all sound like equal nonsense to our actual band name to me.
I just like it because, like, when I looked up, obviously, like, doing a little bit of research, it's like the Sunday Mail, and you're talking about like ungoogleable. I was just still like, man, like, if I looked up the Sunday Mail, like, I get it. Like, some bands you look out and you're like, okay, this was what they started off with, and then if you Google that, you're not getting the hit. So that's what I think when you said the Sunday Mail. I'm like, if you look that Sunday Mail up, don't matter if you're in Canada, US, wherever, the first thing you're going to see is like, oh, here's what you missed in the news, especially nowadays.
Exactly. Yeah. Right? And and the reason we didn't stick with that band name was, one, we knew it was kind of like a bad joke, because it's, haha, the mail doesn't come on Sundays,
Yeah.
But also, even at that time, I mean, I think there were like a dozen newspapers around the world called the Sunday Mail. So,
Yeah, because I guess they're looking at the same standpoint of like, hey, you're not getting mail on Sunday, but it's like everyone's trying to be creative. I think it's just interesting because I've mentioned this to other acts that we've had on as well, but like, coming up with a band name is one thing, but like I feel like, not to date myself, but I was just one of those creative kids that I was like, I'm not using Google. I'm just going to come up with stuff on the fly. And then the most creative name I could have came up with was like Bleth, because it was like during an emo stage. Yeah, it was like during an emo stage where I liked Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, and I'm in high school. I don't have a single musical like bone in my body, but I'm like, maybe I can like create a band and I'll just be like the manager, but I'll have like the name already down pat. And I'm like, I like the color blue. And what's trending right now is like death, emo. So I'm like, Blue Death, Bleth. But then like someone was like, yeah, but what about if you really suck? Then people just be like, oh, it's so blah. I'm like, oh, you're right. Totally right.
I just realized something, and I don't know if this is useful, but I wasn't using my. Are you hearing my audio through? Like, does it sound decent quality?
Yeah.
Okay, because for some reason it didn't look like my USB mic was the thing that was actually coming through. But if it sounds good, then it sounds good.
Yeah, that's Great. Fine. Like I've got it on 2 different channels anyway, so like I can always like post edit a channel, so it's totally fine.
Awesome.
But yeah, so like that was one I came up with. And then when my friend was like, yeah, but what about if you suck and it's blah? I'm like, oh, you're right. And then I just seen a lot of albums with like All Time Low and then different names to like what they called albums. And I'm like, similar to what you said, but I was like, okay, let's come up with something that it sounds cool. So I was like, what about if we just called ourselves Sophomore Year? And then I was like, that sounds like a kick-ass name for a band. And I never Googled it. So knowing me and my luck, I'd like start performing with a band called Sophomore Year. And they'd be like, actually, I'd be like, because like the Arkells had mentioned like their original one was Charlemagne. And then someone named Charlemagne the God or something sent them a cease and desist letter.
Oh, yeah, right.
And like Blink 182 was called Blink. And then someone was like, hey, you can't use that. And I'm like, man, that's way before you could just type it in and see what happens. Totally. Now today, you see people with like creative names, and you're like, you definitely spent some time on that. Like, there's just, you definitely just wanted to be called like Alex, and there was someone called Alex. You're like Alex 23. Like, okay,
yeah,
yeah. And then you just make that trending. Like, you don't even care. It's like someone's like, man, that sounds so lame, until they blow up, and then you're like, oh, it sounds so cool now. It's like, yeah, it probably didn't though when you first heard it.
I actually have a document still rolling on my phone. Just whenever I see something, I'm like, oh, that would be a good band name.
Yeah, or a good album name at this point.
Constantly adding to. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask you, because like you mentioned, of course, creating this band in university with Ben and Jesse. Now, it was probably, I guess it was like your sophomore year or your last year of university that you created your sophomore album. How hard is that to do in university? Because I mean, like, depending on what you're studying, I was doing communications, so it was pretty easy if I wanted to go and do something else. But like, depending on your focus, you're still trying to make your dreams come true in music, but also, okay, I still got to try to either get this degree or something that I've spent my time at university for. Like, how hard was that to manage?
Well, we were maybe blessed by not actually having a career. I mean, we didn't. It's hard to explain, because we enjoyed the band a lot. We played a lot, but none of us in the band had any ambition of what to do with it.
That's fair.
Like, our ambition was just like to play. We're like, oh, we've got this show in the cafeteria coming up in 2 weeks. We got to make some flyers and put them under people's doors. You know what I mean? It was very rudimentary stuff. So, it never really bumped up against classwork or anything like that. We didn't start. The timing of it was that in our last semester of college was pretty much the first time that anybody started taking us seriously. And we recorded our album during Christmas break of college, so that didn't really bump up against anything. We also recorded it in only 6 days, so it didn't exactly take that much time. So yeah, we never really bumped up against that as a conflict at all. And in fact, I think none of us were interested in having it be a conflict,
So I guess another side question to that is like, when you first start off creating a band and you want to just play because you guys like the music, or you guys like it's something that maybe it's like an interest or hobby of yours, but like, when do you kind of cross that road where you're kind of like, all right, this has been fun, but now we either need to make money off this or we need to take this serious? Because I know people like to put it out there on social media, like, hey, we're fun-loving guys, or like, hey, I'm a girl that likes playing music, but guess what? I don't take it too seriously. It's like, all right, there has to come a point where you're like, yeah, you can be that as a person, but you need to make something out of it. So people just don't go like, yeah, whatever. Like, that's just a side hustle. It's like, no, it's like, this is what I do for a living.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think for us, luckily, those two moments that collided where we started taking it more seriously and people started taking us more seriously kind of around the same time. So we didn't run into that weird feeling of taking it more seriously and not getting it fed back at you. Because I've had that happen with side projects or whatever, Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we recorded our album during our senior year, and that was like a terrifying amount of money to put down as of like our summer work. Really, it was I kind of self-financed our album with my summer work money. Yeah, that was like a very terrifying experience. So that after that, we were like, well, we got to book a CD release show. And it just so happened that somehow I don't know if it was just that we were seniors in college or if we just happened to get good enough, but it felt like word was spreading on its own. And so when we played a gig, we knew there were going to be people there. Whereas, we had 3 years where, anywhere we played, we could count on 5 to 9 people being there.
Yeah.
And that was true for everywhere outside of Washington, D.C. After we graduated. So it took us a long time to kind of organically build the fan base that we have now outside of Washington, D.C. But Washington, D.C. was our first, like, we got this really wonderful look at what it could be.
Okay.
In a very early stage. So like, our senior year of college, like we did a CD release show and like 700 people came out. We were like, okay, well, like,
wow,
we should do this. Like, it would be silly not to,
It's almost like, yeah, it's like you're a one hit, like not like a one hit wonder, but like a one-time thing where it's like, hey, we're going to do this. Whoever shows up, great. But letting you know that this is it.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I don't know, based on the kind of people that we are, I don't know how long we would have kept going if people weren't coming.
Yeah.
If people hadn't started coming when we started taking it seriously, I wouldn't say that we're like lazy, but none of us, I think, had the kind of, I see a lot. I feel like I meet kids at shows who are asking me like career advice and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I was not that kid. So I kind of don't know how to answer them. I think we were very much coming to it from a place of like, we're 3 people. We enjoy writing songs. We like playing music and we like playing music for our friends.
Yeah.
And then we just got lucky,
I feel like you give that answer to like a 16 or 15-year-old today. They're like, all right, this guy's an asshole. You don't want to share his secrets.
Right. Well, I mean, also, like, good Lord, ask me to start a project now. I don't know. I don't know what I would do,
Well, I feel like, so kind of similar to you, when I started doing this podcast, it was kind of like I was doing, I think it was like radio broadcast at university or college. And we had to do an internship. So I did an internship in Toronto, and it just wasn't panning out the way I wanted to, but you needed that internship to pass. And then I went back and I was like so frustrated. And I just went in to talk to my teacher. I was like, screw it. Like, I'm just going to come up with a podcast. Everyone else has a podcast. And then he's like, okay, what are you going to talk about? It's like sports. And he's like, I'm not approving that. I'm like, how do you, I need 2 weeks. Like, I need 2 weeks and then I pass. And he's like, well, think of something. So I just like left in a rage. And I remember like the last words I said to him, I was like, I'm just going to interview Colin Mockery and the Arkells and you'll see. And then he was like, I like it. Do it. And I was like, all right. There's a part of me that's like, you opened your fucking mouth now. How are you going to do that?
Yeah, right.
And then there's a part of me that's like, I'm in a radio broadcast school. I have the equipment. Just go do it and see what happens. And yeah, but I feel like a 30-year-old Brian compared to 20-year-old Brian, like now that I kind of have a following, I'm like, all right, I'm going to let these people down if I don't do episodes. But a 20-year-old Brian, if like was just eager to go, if someone was like at 30, all right, start all over again. I'm like, I don't want to. I was like, I got to go all over. Like, no, I don't want to do that. It's like 20-year-old Brian set the 20-year-old Brian set the groundwork, and 30-year-old Brian's living off his enthusiasm.
Yeah, I definitely feel that way about a lot of creative endeavors. I mean, like you really do coast off early momentum in a lot of different ways. It's great. It's great. I'm very grateful to my past self for working hard at all sorts of things.
Exactly. I feel like 20-year-old Brian is like looking at 30-year-old Brian like, thank you. You continue to go and you get a high five. And there's like a 40-year-old Brian now that's probably like, I don't know, just like as a hypothetical, he could be like living in a bigger house. And he's like, good job, 30-year-old Brian. Even when things got dark, you stayed. And I'm like, wait, you're telling me in 10 years I could have a house and all this because of podcasting? They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. Like, that sounds good to me. Like, let's keep going.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I do like the social media presence, because I think Ben had done something with social media. And like, I like how you're all active with social media, but to the fun aspect. Because I was scrolling through it. I think Ben does a perfect job of summarizing social media, where he's like, how we interacted with our manager over the years.
Oh,
It's like Facebook's it. You have to post on Facebook every day. You have to post on Twitter. Now it's TikTok. I've given up. I've stopped. I'm like, you know what? TikTok is for a younger generation than me. I will post clips, but I'm not heavily invested, just because, like Ben said, like there could be something in the next coming years down the road. So I'm like, as long as I kind of stay active with stuff and you know where to find me, that's great. But I was never into Snapchat. I like Instagram, but I'm not like diehard. Oh my God, if I don't post this today, people won't see that. Like, how do you as a band kind of manage all that?
We kind of don't. I mean, we try our best, but I mean, and this is something that I felt like I really came up against, particularly starting like probably 7 or 8 years ago, feeling like music was just impossible to promote on the internet, just because it's such a visual medium.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you feel like you're just begging people to like, please listen to my music for free, which it can feel really degrading. So I actually started, I became a cartoonist around that more seriously. Okay. And now, I mean, now I kind of do half and half, my cartoon work and the band, just because I found that, I did like a cartoon a day for a year as a personal challenge. And then from there, it kind of grew and snowballed. And now it's kind of got its own following. And it's just because pictures are a lot easier to do on the internet than music. They kind of like move themselves. You don't have to like always swim upstream. So yeah, I mean, now I'm in the weird position where my cartooning platform is much bigger than the band's. So I'm constantly telling people to be like, when I put out a cartoon, I'm like, check out my band,
Yeah.
but I feel like nobody believes me that it's like we're a serious band,
Yeah. They're just like, he's like, well, he does such good cartooning. Maybe he's just a jokester with a band. And then when they go listen to music, he's like, no, that's actually real crap. Like, that's real shit that we're listening to.
Real crap.
No. It's like the realest shit that we're listening to, because they expect it to be like, oh, it's probably going to be like him making fun of me's cartooning, and it's like, no, that's serious topics he's singing about.
Yeah, just like
oh,
Looney Tunes sound effects or something. But yeah, I mean, so I found that I was astonished how much easier it was to be a cartoonist online than to be a musician, and in a very like short amount of time of taking it seriously, as opposed to my music career, which I've been taking seriously on the internet for a long time, getting nowhere really. And cartooning just felt like you were just like, instead of swimming upstream, you're just tubing down the river,
I feel like it's just social media in general, just like, if you try too hard at it, you're just going to get frustrated. Where if you try very little and like, just post, it's almost like it comes to, do you want the medium or do you want the message? And I think people are like, they're not concerned about the message. It's just the medium, where it's like, all right, post. Then you scroll through it, you're like, all right, half this was good. But it's like, people are like, which half did you like? I don't know. I like this half. And then it's just, you open yourself to an audience where if you concern yourself with, well, I want this as the message, you're only focusing on one particular group.
I mean, I really feel for anyone who's starting in the music industry right now, especially since the pivot to video has kind of happened on every major platform, just because like, boy, video content's a lot of work. And, I don't know about you. I love music. I love writing music. I love playing music. I didn't get into music because I wanted to make videos. Like, I don't care. So, I can summon these ways to try and stay engaged with it. But boy, if you're a musician who doesn't like being on camera or doing selfie style confessionals and stuff, like it's really it's hard just to promote and engage with music on its own merits online. It has to be always attached to something else.
Yeah, I feel like a good example of that, like now, depending on when you, like, I grew up listening to like Blink-182, Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Britney, like all the pop stuff, but like we didn't have social media. So like the only time you'd hear them on the radio, and then you'd get like super excited if they came out with a video for that song, and you'd see it on like Much Music here in Canada or like MTV. But like that was kind of a gift that you got to, like, because there are certain songs that you like, but there's no music video, and I'm fine with that. But now, like, I look at it when I was in university, and you had like the Ed Sheerans, the John Mayers, and I'm like, I am totally fine. I think for like a good solid 3 years listening to Ed Sheeran, I didn't know who he was. Like, I knew him as a musician, but never knew his face. Kind of the same with John Mayer. And I was like, I'm okay with the whole rest of my life if I never see your face, because your songs are good, you're talented. And to this day, I think with Ed and John's social media, it's mostly like if you see an Ed Sheeran promo, it's probably just him being like, hey, like, check out this act we signed, Macy Peters. I'm going to help her out. I'm like, good. Thank you. Don't make a 2-minute long video where it's like, hey, check out my new song. I'm like, we know who he is. He's talented. Boom. Got it. But there are artists out there now who you don't know of. And that's literally what they have to do, is find a trend, hop on it. And then that's how they become more popular. Like, yeah, I know, like, I know, yeah, like, I know who Charlie, is it like Charlie Puth? Is it Puth? Yeah, like, I know who he is.
I know he is through TikTok. But yeah, it's weird because, like, I don't know what his music sounds like. He's just he appears on my TikTok feed.
Yeah, like, I knew who he was because of like Wiz Khalifa and the song "See You." Is it like, yeah, "See You Again"? And then he kind of disappeared for me. But then this younger generation, because I have a niece and nephew, will do TikToks with his sound, and I'm like, you know who that is? And they're like, oh yeah, it's Charlie Puth, he's great. And I'm like, all right. And then you'll play the song "See You Again." They're like, what is this? I'm like, that is still the same guy. And they're like, well, it sounds like I don't like it. And I'm like, all right, congrats, Charlie Puth. You found your audience. You found a way to stay trending and like relative, but I like you better over here.
Right. Yeah. It's a weird new landscape. It's hard to traverse. Or at least it's hard to traverse and maintain interest, I think, as a creator, because it feels, especially in this sort of like hyper algorithm focused era, it doesn't feel like you have any control. And when things are successful, which they, we've had videos that have gotten a lot of plays, but you never know which one. And sometimes it's like the absolute worst one you've done, but for some reason, it's just like,
it just pops in someone's algorithm.
It's really, really strange. So yeah, we're still trying to figure out our TikTok lane. We tried pretty hard this spring, and I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, we are 30-somethings on TikTok, which is not really.
That's where I'm too. That's where I'm
front of TikTok.
I have a niece and nephew that will come over, and like they'll look at TikTok trends, and they'll look at my platform, and then they'll be like, you don't do anything on TikTok. I'm like, I'm sorry, I post a clip about my interviews. Like, it's for a grown up audience. But because I want to touch base on this, because I think this is interesting, and like it's a peak where I think a lot of bands kind of get that overall exposure. Because in 2010, you went on Letterman, and I feel like that's where, like, for someone like myself, I grew up loving Conan. So I like, I'm here watching Conan because I like Conan, but I like who he interviews. Then I get exposed to that person, like a Matthew Perry, Sarah Silverman, whoever he has on. I'm like, oh, okay. Now I know who you are. Now I'm going to do a little bit of research on you. But I always stick around for the band aspect to see, like, all right, he'll either have like someone we know on. And sometimes when I'm younger, when I'm stupid and I see like a no-name band at first, I'm like, what happened? Did someone forget to make a phone call? Did you go down the street and just ask these guys to perform?
Right. But that was us.
Yeah. But then it's almost like you listen to him, you're like, all right, I'm down with it. I can listen to it. But do you find like now, like back then, that's how you kind of got your mass audience or exposure through like going on a late night show or?
No, it's really funny. I mean, I think we thought that might be the case.
Yeah.
We didn't see any real meaningful bump
Oh, wow.
in attendance in our shows or anything from that, and it was too early for streaming. So for us, it was a really exciting opportunity.
Yeah.
And more than growing our audience, it was just like a legitimacy bump.
Yeah, like just to show like we are here. We kind of like we've arrived, we're musicians.
Yeah, but it's funny because like nothing on the ground actually changed. And we only got on Letterman because somebody had dropped off that day.
Oh.
So
Wow.
we had like 14 hours notice for playing Letterman.
Okay.
So we got a half a night of sleep and then loaded into the studio at 8 a.m. And then played and then watched it that night. It was very strange because it wasn't even on our radar that we could be on Letterman.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of interested. That like I don't know if you would know it. I don't mean to cut you off, but just from a guy that like enjoys late night television as well.
Yeah.
It's just like, how does that even come to fruition? Like, do you even know how someone gets a hold of you in that case? Like, do they send something to your PR, or are they just kind of like,
it's
looking for local bands, like someone in the area right now that I can get?
No, it's all press people. So our label, our small label at the time, had hired a press company that I guess ended up having a connection with the booker there, and that last minute, whoever dropped off, we'll never really know.
Yeah.
But whoever dropped off, they called the press agency and they called us. But yeah, you can't. Yeah, the only way you'd get on one of those shows is by being already famous and having a press person. Who's like hustling you full time.
Yeah, no, I just thought it was kind of interesting because like there are times I'll turn on a late night talk show or TV like back in the day, and then you see a band on, you're like, okay, interesting. But like, I wonder if that's like their every story's like, kind of exposure story where you're like, all right, like I wonder who they were supposed to have on. It's like, oh well, the hidden gem now is like that band was never supposed to be there, and then it's like, well, someone backed out, and that's how they got there. And then you're like, oh,
right,
cool.
Yeah.
Totally. But like,
I'll always say we played Conan twice, and we did get actually booked for Conan in advance. So
okay. Yeah. So there you go. Prep to Conan. I like Conan. Like I mean, listen, everyone
Conan.
has
my favorite
like
growing up too.
Yeah, like everyone has their favorite, and it's kind of interesting. Like I'm not hating on Jay or hating on like Dave, but Conan was just my guy. Like as soon as I see him take over the Tonight Show, it's like, all right, I'm a little bit worried for you, Conan, because I was in university. I'm like, you're more of a late night guy.
Yeah,
but
totally.
I still feel like they fucked him. I don't care. Like listen, I have nothing against Fallon, but it's just to the point where I'm just like, you move the Tonight Show for Fallon, but you wouldn't move it for Conan to go do his in New York. I'm like, that's a little bit like bang. Like I'd be, if I was Conan, I'd be like, I'm bitter. I don't care. I'm bitter.
Totally. But yeah, I mean, his energy certainly made more sense for that. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the. I mean, I love Colbert, but for me, it'll always be in my heart as the Colbert Report.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just that's a little edgier format, and that's totally his vibe.
I had like a whole theory based on like, because I've actually read like the whole Late Night Shift book and then the War for Late Night, because again, I always wanted to be a host, but I always think if there was just a few years in the difference where it's like, if you knew Stewart was retiring when he did and Colbert had not signed for CBS at that time, I'm like, Colbert takes over the Daily Show. It's like you can get Seth Meyers to take over the Colbert Report, because I like Seth Meyers as more of a political guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, Conan stays where he is. Fallon stays where he is. Ferguson takes over the Late Show. All right, then, Ferguson, if you want to give him that kind of time frame. And then you'd have Corden take over the Late Show. Like, it's still a perfect lineup, but I guess, like, things just, they don't align. And then, like, things happen. But I'm like, as soon as I heard Colbert take over the Late Show, I'm like, all right, like, how is that going to work? Like, I like Colbert for political humor, but I don't know how I like him as just, like, normal satire, make jokes, because everyone has everyone had a thing. Like Ferguson's thing was monologues. Conan's thing was more of he's comfortable doing interviews. Like, everyone had a thing, and I'm like, Colbert, what? You have political stuff. How's this working?
Well, I mean, and to be honest, I mean, he's great at it. It's just that for me, Colbert's genius in both his dramatic roles that he did, like in Strangers with Candy, or like with the Colbert Report, is he's so good at smartly playing an idiot.
Yeah.
And that's totally his genius, you know? So when he's just being himself, you're like, oh, this is great, but I kind of wish you were being an idiot.
Yeah, it's like when I watched, I think I watched Colbert before Stewart, but my brother liked Stewart. But I remember coming home from school and watching Stewart, like when I got older. And I was like, you know what? Like Stewart's actually not that bad either. Like you got to be a little bit brainy to understand what's on the go. But if you understand some of the topics, it's not over your head. Let's put it that way. Sure, but Colbert just made it kind of more dumber down. And I'm like, okay, that's why I probably like Colbert first. Cause I was like, he is talking to me, the dumb individual. Where Stewart's like, all right, I expect you to know a little bit about this. I'm like, no, Stewart, I don't. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. And then he's like, kind of like pissed off at you for not knowing it. And I'm like, just hit your punchline and I'll laugh.
Yeah, totally.
I want to ask you, of course, like now during COVID, because a lot of acts during COVID, it became like a divide of, do I put out new music? Do I kind of take a break? How did you react to COVID? I'm guessing that's when you kind of got into more cartooning.
Well, not really, actually. Let's see. We had a tour scheduled right when COVID hit. So we canceled that, and then we kicked that down the pipe to the fall, and then we kicked that down the pipe to the spring, and then we kicked that back. You know, we ended up moving the tour 4 different times. Yeah, I mean, I would say that the band. I mean, obviously, it was bad for us financially to have to cancel so many tours. But we lucked out that we had just built our own little recording studio in a little shed office space in South Brooklyn. And so we had already done that, right? Like literally in February before the pandemic hit. So we were ready to record our own next record. We had been building towards that for a few records where we had, recorded some of the stuff on our own, but then brought it to real studios. And we finally felt like we were ready to record our own album. So we built out the space. Pandemic hits. And one of the benefits of it was that all of a sudden we had a lot of time, and normally we're always in a rush to finish things for the next tour, for the next whatever, so we've never been like true studio musicians. Like we've always been kind of rushing, and whether it was usually because we were working in another studio that costed money and we were on a budget. But this time, because it was our own equipment, our own studio, we're not paying by the hour. We just spent an incredible amount of time in there chiseling away, just the 3 of us. And because it was COVID, we were kind of quarantined together. We didn't really have any distractions or, socially, or employment wise, so we recorded just like a ton of music, and some of that is what became Cheers. And yeah, just really, it allowed us to chip away at some more complicated, nuanced tracks that I think we wouldn't have had the time or energy to do in previous eras. Stuff like Hey Maud, or Everybody Panic, or there's a song Sweet of Raise a Glass, How the World Began, Cheers, that ends the record. That there's just a lot of detail and a lot of experimenting that went into it, and it was really fun to actually get to the time and space to be able to do that.
So like during the pandemic, not to make it sound like, oh yeah, we're going to like really hit them hard here, but like you like kind of having like the kind of, I guess, peace and space to kind of like, I guess mentally, like some people were burnt out, and then some artists, I'm surprised, because if you're already made in the industry, you're kind of looking at me like, all right, I'm going to take a break. If you're not, you're kind of like, okay, what do I do here? Do I kind of stop? Because you got to look at the whole bigger picture here. Because I think some people, and with social media, you get pros and cons. This just is what it is. I think Dua Lipa I think that's how you pronounce it, but she came out with like an album, and half the people were like, great, so we are having artists that release music. And then there were some people like, feel the room. Like, we're in a pandemic. No one can afford this. And it's like, relax. At least she's making a stand of saying, yeah, I've got music here. If you guys are bummed out because the pandemic, let me be your savior. I'm like, you know what? All right, fair. It's like some people might not like it, but good for you. But
yeah, right.
There are other people like,
2020 was definitely weird like that. I released my first book of comics during the fall of 2020, and it was like huge protests in the streets, and the Trump Biden election and COVID rampaging, and like it did feel like a really weird time to be like, hey, check out my book. You can go to a bookstore and check out my book. So I had to like be really careful about how I was doing it. It was not a great time to release music or art, that's for sure.
Yeah, because I mean, the only real example I can think of from a past like conversation we had like Nick Wheeler on from the All American Rejects, and he had mentioned when they were first coming out with like their album, I think it was like maybe 2001, and it was like really around 9/11. And it's like, all right, geez, like what a great time to come out with music and shit, because you're basically like, hey, I know in the States we're all kind of worried about what just happened in people's lives, but we're a new band. Check out our song. It's like, oh, it's like, how do you promote it without making it sound like we're not actual piece of shit? We got our lives too, and we're musicians, and this is what we do for a living.
Totally.
Yeah. It's like with me coming out with a podcast tomorrow and like, the world is ending, and be like, I know the world's ending and I know we're all going to shit, but hey, before it goes to crap, can you at least download this episode? Someone's like, feel the room, Tobin. I'd be I felt it, and I need the energy. I want to ask you, because where you did mention about the new album, like tell me maybe some things that were different from this album because obviously it was a different situation of doing it this time, but like tell me some different situations of like this album compared to your last one, and like things that you've learned. Because I know from episode 1 of doing this podcast to episode 50 to 100, I'll look and be like, what else do I have to learn? And then there's other things I'm like, you know what? You could have did this differently, maybe say that differently. So like you take things along the process. What things did you take for this album?
I think what I like about this record is I feel like
we got to take the time to concentrate and do it.
Well, that's one of them. But also like a lot of times when I finish a record, I think most people have this experience with art in general. Like you finish it, and then by the time you actually release it, you kind of hate it. Like you've heard it too many times, or you've heard it too many times, or you hear the shortcomings, or you hear the things you would have done differently, but it's too late. And I kind of don't feel that way about this record for the first time, really, in the band's career. And I think it's because we got to take the time and really,
that's good.
Really take the time with it. I also think like everyone gets to shine on this record in a way that previous records, like, we just don't always find the time to make sure kind of everyone gets their personality on it, you know? So I feel like my songs are very Tommy, and Ben's songs are very Ben, and Jesse's drums are absolutely crushing. Jesse even takes lead vocals on a song.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So yeah, it just feels like all three of our personalities are really like showcased, and sometimes with any collaborative musical project, you can end up compromising something to death, right?
Yeah.
Somebody comes in with a great idea, somebody else doesn't like it, then you compromise, then nobody's happy.
Yeah.
And I feel like this time we kind of followed the passion. Like if somebody was really passionate about something, like it's like, hell yeah, let's just crush it the best we know how to.
I want to ask you, because when you're saying everyone shines, like I was going to say Jesse is the drummer. Like I know you kind of went into it, but I'm thinking in my mind, how is Jesse going to shine as a drummer? Does he get like a minute drum solo, and then you're like, is it at the beginning of the song? Is it the end of the song? Middle of the song? Because like I'm looking at like Guns N' Roses, I think, and then it's like, sometimes Slash more than anything, and you're like, okay, because he just had a lot of solos, and it's like,
yeah,
right? Like there's a whole clip, and I know they joke around, but it's like Michael Jackson and Slash sharing a stage, and it's like who's outperforming who. And then at the end, it's like Michael just kind of goes, okay, like, fuck off, give it up, like, stop. And he just keeps playing. And it's all a part of a bit. But I get it. It's almost like he's the guy who gets the solo, but you're also the guy who gets the solo. Who's outweighing the solo here? But when you mention everyone gets to shine, like, tell me a little bit about that, because you said there's Ben's songs, there's kind of your songs. Like, how would we, as, I guess, people listening to music, know whose songs they are?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't pick up on it at first, but I mean, yeah, me and Ben switch off lead vocals. Yeah. I mean, my voice tends to be a bit more, I don't know.
I was gonna say, are you gonna be like humbly brag and be like, my voice sounds a little bit more better?
No,
like,
no, it's his voice is the better voice. My songs tend to be a bit more storytelling.
Okay.
And narrative and a lot of lyrics. So yeah, on this record, that's definitely true. There's I also really am a big fan of like sort of suites of songs, like in that side 2 of Abbey Road sort of a way. So
okay.
That's the flavor on a lot of my songs in this record. Maybe a little bit sci-fi in lyrical content at times, a little apocalyptic. And Ben just has this amazing, Freddie Mercury kind of voice, and writes these killer pop songs. But yeah, he and I are very different.
Okay. So I'm guessing Ben's the one behind Halloween.
That's sort of everyone's thing.
Okay.
Weirdly, he was not a fan of Queen. I mean, not that he disliked them, but
yeah, it's so weird because he's the one who looks like the most like Queen.
I know. But yeah, he it kind of just fell into it. And by virtue of, we covered a Queen tune, on tour, and people were like, "Wow, that sounds great." Yeah. And I think it's just like we're the right lineup to do Queen. I mean, like, I love playing that style of lead guitar. Ben totally has the Freddie Mercury vocal chops, and he's a classical pianist. So, between that, I mean, like, we're better equipped just naturally to do Queen. And then by covering Queen, we, I think, have all become bigger Queen fans than we were before.
That's fair. I feel like if you go to for younger kids or students or whatever out there, like, as soon as you go in and learn like piano or guitar, and then it's like whoever the music teacher is, if they have a favorite kind of band or artist and they want you to learn that music, and you're like, never heard it before, it's like, all right, just learn the song. And then you learn it, and then you're kind of like, all right, I mastered this, let's keep going. Like, I bring that up as a joke because I think there's going to be like a generation of kids out there who've never heard of Oasis, but will start to learn the song Wonderwall. And then they'll be like, oh yeah, I've been an Oasis fan since like my teacher showed me how to play. Yeah. And I'd be like, shut up. I'm like, we all know a guy who can play guitar that plays Wonderwall. And I'm saying that secretly because I can't do either. Like, I'm just mad when I see him in a room, walk into a party and play it. I'm like, you know what? He's my buddy, but he's a douche. Yeah. Like, play something else. Play something play something today. And they'll be like, wow. It's like, you just cock block me from getting that girl's number. I'm like, because everyone, listen, you're no different than 20 other guys that could sing that song. Play something that they never heard of.
Yep.
But tell me a little bit about like Cheers. Like, was that all of you implemented on that, or like who kind of shone a little bit more? Like, who do you think's that song? Is it more Ben? It's more you?
That's like a really rare example of this phenomena. But I usually whoever's singing wrote the song, but Cheers I kind of wrote for Ben.
Oh, nice.
Which I was in, but Ben also co-wrote it too.
Yeah.
It's very complicated, actually. So
it's good friendship.
I was just hanging out with a producer friend in LA, and we were trying to write a song. And I just, for whatever reason, this old hook that Ben had written probably 10 years before that.
Okay. You kept it.
That he never finished. I was like, what if we did something based on this? And it was just that little beginning thing on the song that he's the more of the everyday.
Okay.
Just that one line. And so we used that as a springboard. And then me and my friend Tim we wrote a song that day using that as the springboard. And then brought it to the band and kind of kept tweaking it. But yeah, usually whoever's singing it wrote it, and that one's a lot more collaborative than our usual.
So like, I guess my other question here is like a side part, but like, are you more of a lyrics first guy, or more like you play something and then you hear it and you're like, okay, this would be good as a beat? Like, because sometimes I'll listen to the music and like I like the beat, or I like how all the instruments collaborate, and then you listen to the rest of the song, you're like, that's not where I would have went with that. And then sometimes you listen to like the lyrics and you're like, I get the lyrics. Like I'll listen to like, I don't know, sometimes to me I think the lyrics come first, because then you can almost like, depending on the mood of the song, you can always like change it up. Like for me with country music, I know maybe it's a difficult example or hard example, but sometimes it's like I'll listen to country music, be like a Rascal Flatts song, and it's upbeat. But then if you slow it down and play it on piano, you're like, oh man, like I can really get into those lyrics a little bit more. Right? Like I think totally. There's a song that like Russell Dickerson has out, and it's like called Yours, but there's like a wedding version and there's a pop version. I'm like, I like both, but the wedding version to me sounds a lot more deeper. Right. But I feel like if he just came up with like, all right, here's the pop song and here's some generic lyrics to this pop song, and it's like, all right, can you do that in piano version? And it's like the piano version would sound like shit, because it's like, I drive a tractor, and I'd be like, I'm not invested. I'm like,
yeah,
it has no meaning. So what say you? Lyrics first, or?
I feel like I kind of cycle through the different methods. Like I used to be, I think original, like very early in the band, I was kind of a lyrics first guy, or lyric heavy. And then I became more of a like riffs and chords and melodies guy, and then I think I kind of got burnt out on both, and then became a drums and bass guy, like in the last like four or 5 years. So yeah, like Ramona, or on the new record, or How the World Began. Those were all drum beat, or Everybody Panic. All of those were drum beat first. Drum and bass groove. But then I don't know. There's some that you just sing into your phone a cappella, and then that's the song. Like the first song on the record, which is kind of just an interlude, intro track called "A Century in the Making." I just wrote that whole thing on a hike when I was just walking around, and sang it into my iPhone, and put it together that night. But you just never know. I mean, and I feel like it helps me to like just kind of spice things up, like maybe write a song on an instrument I don't know well, or something to shake up the snow globe.
That's fair. I feel like when I was younger, like again, not in a band, but I remember sitting like, not even skateboarding, just watching people skateboard, and you're like just being a dick because you're on the half pipe or whatever that they go up and down on. And I was like, man, this would be a great intro to a song. Like on a cold, dark night, I was sitting on a half pipe, and someone's just like, can you just move? And I'm just like, but I'm writing a song. And like, I still remember the lyrics.
It's a great intro.
Yeah. Like I remember the lyrics, but if someone came up to me tomorrow with like all the different instruments in the world to put together, I'd be like, I don't even know where to begin. I'm like, I've got it written up here, but I don't know, like, are we making it a pop song? Are we making a sad song? Can we do both? Like, can we have both versions? And they'd be like, you're the one that's behind it. I'm like, all right, here, $20, you take it. They'd be like, what do you want me to do? It's your vision. I'd be like, I'm just writing it down. Yeah. I can be like a ghostwriter. It's like years later when you get like your I guess I call it getting your heart broken or crushed, when you find out like songs that you liked as a kid. You're like, you look at it so differently when you're older. Like I could be wrong, but like listening to like Britney Spears or Christina Aguilera, Oops, I Did It Again, or Genie in a Bottle, I'm like, that 16-year-old girl definitely wrote that song, because that's how today's world works. Taylor writes hers, Rodrigo writes hers. And It's like, no, some like 50-year-old guy wrote Genie in a Bottle. I'm like, that's kind of weird, man. Like a 50-year-old guy singing about Genie in a Bottle. Like,
don't worry. There's 50-year-old guys still involved with all the other new ones too.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That puts me at ease. Now I'm just gonna every time I listen to a song, I'm not gonna think of like the sexy female that's singing it like a Beyonce or Rihanna. I'm just gonna be like, ugh. It's like somewhere deep down in the valley, there's a guy who's like, what if I said this in a lyric? I'd be like, ugh.
I do appreciate that about new. I mean, a lot of them obviously are writing, like Taylor Swift is writing her own stuff, but yeah, it is interesting now that yeah, in the 90s, I don't think the Backstreet Boys were in the room until the song was already done, and they just had to punch in and replace parts. But I mean, a lot of current artists, I mean, like, even if they have other people writing for them, you know, like
they have some input.
They have some input, and so that's nice. There's a little more personality there.
Yeah, I feel like that's better. Like, I feel like when you actually then ask the artist about the song, they're not just coming up with like, oh, well, like I sat in a room and this guy brought it to me and I loved it, and we just sat down. Like, I think there was like a clip. Now I could be wrong, but it's like Rihanna talking about the song Umbrella, or it could have been Diamonds. And she was like very like, oh my God, up in the air of whether she was even going to be asked to be on the track. But she was like, oh, I knew it was going to be great. But she was like, I was so worried if they were going to ask me or not, because it's like one of her big hits. And I was like, man, that got to be so weird for you, where it's like someone is writing the song and you're like, all right, like just please ask for my vocals.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
funny.
how about you write the song you want, release it, and then we decide if we like it. Like, right.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's like sometimes I look at like a country music singer, like I think it's like Thomas Rhett or like a Garth Brooks, and like when you listen to them explain the song, you're like, you're not bullshitting me. You wrote that. Because I listened to like Garth Brooks talk about the Thunder Rolls, and I'm like, that's either a really personal experience that happened in your life, or like that's how you felt, and this you explain it. Where an artist who didn't write it will just be like, I don't know, man, I just came in the room and like you know, I kind of felt the song. I'm like, you didn't feel any of it. You just put your voice down and said, all right, awesome.
Right.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit of the fun aspect here. Like, I want to talk to you about, like, I guess a little bit of the beats behind the songs, because do you ever get like, you know, people come up and compare you to stuff, or like when you're coming out with albums, you want to find things that, you know, people will know or listen to. But has anyone ever told you like you're a combination, to me anyway, of like the Bleachers, AGR, a little bit like 1975? Because I listen to Schizophrenia and I really like the intro. But like, do you ever get that? Do like people come up to you and be like, you sound like this band and I like that? Or do they like, you sound like this and I hate it?
Yeah, no, it's always fascinating to hear what people, you know, I mean, you just listed bands I don't really know very well.
That's
I know that they're very popular, but I don't know their music very well.
That's when you go back now. It's like, this is where it's pre-recorded. You go and like take 5-10 minutes and be like, hold on. Yeah. And you come back and be like, all right, I listen.
I know I've heard all three of those bands. But yeah, so I don't know. I've always been surprised. Like, you know, earlier in our career, everyone would say we sounded like whoever had a piano, you know. So they would say we sounded like Ben Folds 5 or Elton John or Queen.
I could see that.
You know, just because we have a piano. And then for I don't know, for a while it was like a different generation of band, and I mean, it's just
what's like, I guess
any comparison is fine.
Like, I guess a kind of a fun question to go off that would be like, what is maybe the best comparison you got and your worst comparison? Because I'll share mine to kind of put you at ease here. But like, the best one I ever got was someone like on Instagram who does podcasting was like, I like watching your interviews because you remind me of a young Conan. And I was like, that is the best compliment I think I'll ever receive. I don't care if I die tomorrow and my mom was like, he was my favorite son. I'd be like, no, nothing beats being compared to Conan. Where I feel like the worst comment I ever received was like, this guy is mediocre. His guests deserve better. I'm not wasting my time on this. And I was like, how do I make that a positive for a promo? How do I spin that where it makes me sound like something like Conan would do, where it's like, all right, I'm reading your negative, but maybe that draws in an audience because like, how mediocre can he be? Let me check him out. Oh yeah, he's definitely mediocre, but I like his acts.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, I feel like most of the like when we get a comparison, it's usually something that's kind of alien to me. So I'm usually not offended because I don't really know to be offended. But yeah, I don't know. It's also like if somebody's comparing us to somebody, they're usually not saying it because they hate us. They're usually trying to engage with us with how they listen to music. And so Even if it was an artist I didn't like I would still just if I could tell that they liked that artist, then it's a compliment, so I'll take it.
Yeah, I feel like, you know what? When you say that, it almost makes me feel better when someone's like, "This guy's a Jimmy Fallon." I might not like Jimmy Fallon.
If they like Jimmy Fallon, then they're saying something nice.
Yeah, it could be worse if you like go back to their profile and you just see him like scratch out everything Jimmy Fallon. You're like, "Ooh," it's like, okay, I guess that's not a compliment to me. I guess he's like, you're next on my list of people I hate. I'd be like, all right, lock the doors.
Yeah.
So like, I guess like a little bit of the fun aspect, we like to play a game at the end called like Random Question Generator. This is where I lose the power of my own podcast.
I love it.
All right. So I've got like a random question generator here. And I sometimes like to like kind of implement a little bit of power just because depending on what the question asks. But the first random one here is number one, have you ever been to Canada?
I'm literally in Canada right now.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So it works because now it will ask, what's your favorite part about Canada?
Oh, let's see. I just went to Algonquin Provincial Park for the first time, and I thought that was lovely.
Nice. Okay.
Did a portage canoe trip.
Nice. Yeah. What's your favorite kind of Canadian snack? Like I know down here in Newfoundland, we have Pineapple Crush.
Oh, wow.
I love Pineapple Crush. When I go like to Ontario, there's no pineapple. There might be like orange. I don't even think there's lime crush. There might be, but
I think my favorite is well, I'm not a big candy person, but I was introduced.
Oh, you just lost me. No.
But I just got introduced to Coffee Crisp, which they do not have in the States, and I think Coffee Crisp is a phenomenal candy bar.
You have to see. So I will tell you this: you have to go back and look at like some of the Coffee Crisp commercial because they're pretty creative. Like someone will show you the difference between having coffee in the morning and a Coffee Crisp. And there's literally one where someone will like, to make it look so simple, is they just wheel out their desk and there's a Coffee Crisp in it. And then they wheel out their desk and it's just full of coffee with a cup. And I'm like, you're selling me. You're basically saying it's easier to go in the morning, just take Coffee Crisp, gives you the same boost as a coffee do. And then there's also a side of me who goes like the Tom Brady approach where it's like, I've never had coffee. But then someone will be like, have you ever had a Coffee Crisp? I'll be like, oh my God, you're right. I'm a fucking addict. I'm no better than you.
They're very good.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Tommy from Jukebox the Ghost for coming onto the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying thank you for listening and good night.